Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is, and Happy New Year as it turns out to be. Welcome to Left Side of the Aisle. I'm your host, Larry Erickson, and for the next half hour, I'm going to be talking about some stuff. As always, you can send any responses, any reactions to the show. You can send them to me directly at Whoviating, WHOVIATING at AOL.com. That's my personal email. Or you can go to my website, which is called Lotus Surviving a Dark Time. And the URL will be here a couple times during the show. And you can get the email address from there, or you can leave a comment there if you'd like. I do ask if you send me email to please include something in the subject line to make it clear this is not spam, and be a little patient about getting an answer, because I'm not even going to bother making New Year's resolution about doing better at answering email, because I know I'll break in the first week. So we are going to do a little bit different. This is our first show of 2016. So as a lot of kind of shows do, we're going to be including some, in the course of this, some recaps of some of our big features for the last year. So you can look forward to that. But we're going to start, as we always like to, with a couple of quick bits of good news. One is that minimum wage workers in 14 states got a raise as of January 1st. Minimum wage went up in 14 states. In 12 of those states, those being Alaska, Arkansas, California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nebraska, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and West Virginia, those increases came as the result of legislative action. In the other two, Colorado and South Dakota, this is it reflects a cost of living increase which is pegged to inflation. The new minimums in these states range from a low of $8 an hour in Arkansas to $10 an hour in California and Massachusetts. And all of them are above the paltry federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. All right, the other bit of good news is that Barack Obama has, as he pledged to do, he's taken executive action on gun control. Now, ultimately, it wasn't actually that much, and it wasn't nearly as much as his supporters made it out to be. It consisted mostly of expanding background checks for gun purchases by limiting some of the exceptions and loopholes that now exist for getting background checks. But then again, in fairness, there wasn't a lot he could do, since the authority he has here lies only in regulations to clarify existing law. And also he knows damn well that even these clarifications are going to be challenged in court. Then again, it was by clarifying existing law that the Shrub Gang convinced themselves that torture is as American as apple pie, so apparently there is some latitude there. But in one sense, it doesn't matter if what he did made only a little difference. Just like the story of the girl with the starfish, even a little difference is still a difference. And that's good news. All right, and actually, a little bit of good news of the year. One of our parts of looking back over the last year, I've got my nominee, my choice for good news of the year. Now, we did have some good news over the course of the year. 4 states, those being Maryland, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, and Connecticut, did away with, or at least put on hold, the use of the death penalty. The United States reestablished diplomatic relations with Cuba. A highly effective vaccine against Ebola has been developed. Despite barriers thrown up by the Supreme Court, state legislatures are finding ways to tighten controls on guns in ways that have found favor with the courts. And the Keystone XL pipeline was blocked. Those all things are good news. But for me, the good news of the year was an easy call. It came on June 26th, the day the Supreme Court announced its decision that state bans on same-sex marriage are unconstitutional. As I said at the time, quoting what I said at the time, make no mistake, this is an historic decision. This is our generation's Loving v. Virginia, which struck down bans on interracial marriage. It is our generation's Brown v. Board of Education, which banned racial segregation in public schools. In future years, the case, which is known as Obergefell v. Hodges, that case will in the future be referred to as one that clearly expanded human rights in the United States. I had cause to say then and later that this, of course, did not mean the end of the issue of LGBTQ rights, or as it turned out, even just of marriage rights, as Kim Davis's nonsense proved. But none of that, again, changes the historic nature of this decision. And it is my choice for good news of the year. Now, something else we do on the show from time to time is RIPs. They're, like noting that somebody died. It's usually somebody well, or at least reasonably well-known person whose death triggers for me some sort of memory, some sort of connection with previous times. So I figured what I'd do here is take a recap of those whose death we acknowledge on this show in 2015. The first of those was Leslie Gore, a 60s pop singer who was known for songs like It's My Party and You Don't Own Me. Then there was Leonard Nimoy. Now, he was a director, author, poet, photographer, and art collector, but he was, and for legions of fans always will be and remain, Mr. Spock, because that's only logical. Minnie Minoso died last year. That's a name you may not know, but he was the 9th non-white and the first Cuban to play Major League Baseball, where his speed, and he actually led the American League in triples and steals 3 times each. His speed earned him the nickname the Cuban Comet. He was also a 7-time All-Star and won the Golden Glove Award 3 times. Sarah Brady was the next person to get an RIP here. She was instrumental in the passage of the Brady Bill in 1993, which was about the last major piece of gun control legislation we've seen. In her own words, she made it her life's ambition to put the NRA out of business. Now, obviously, she didn't succeed in that, but no one ever denied or doubted her commitment or her determination. Then came Percy Sledge, someone who, even if you didn't recall the name, you knew what he was famous for. The song that has been called the definitive soul ballad, When a Man Loves a Woman. The third musical loss of the year, and third on this RIP list, was for me the saddest. The man who redefined the blues and helped to define what blues guitar is, B.B. King, died in 2015. And the last person who got an RIP in the show in 2015 was Theodore Bickel, the accomplished actor whose skill with accents saw him playing everything from a German military officer in World War II to a Southern sheriff in the United States, and who, a particular meaning to me, helped found the Newport Folk Festival. And we have one more RIP. This actually, even though we're doing it in 2016, I think of it as a 2015 RIP because the man in question did die last year. His name was John Trudell, and he died of cancer on December 8th. John Trudell was an activist for Native American rights, a spokesman for the American Indian movement throughout most of the 70s. He was also an actor, a musician, and a poet. He first came to the public eye in 1969 during the occupation of Alcatraz Island by Native Americans and some supporters. He arrived on the island about a week after the occupation started and used his background in broadcasting to set up and run a radio station on the island called Radio Free Alcatraz. He remained the voice of the occupation until it ended in 1971. After that, he became involved with the American Indian movement and was its national chair from 1973 to 1979, during which time he was regarded by the powers that be as such a threat that the FBI assembled a dossier on him that ran to over 17,000 pages. But his life changed on February 12, 1979, when a suspicious fire ripped through the home of his wife's parents on the Duck Valley Indian Reservation in Nevada. His wife, their 3 children, and his mother-in-law all died in the blaze. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA police investigation said it was an accident, but another investigation said that that was very improbable, and Trudell was and remained convinced that the fire was intended to silence him and his equally activist wife, Tina Manning. After that, and in the wake of a meeting with Jackson Browne, Trudell turned to music and poetry to tell the stories that he felt needed to be told. Over the course of 10 albums, the last of which was issued in 2015, he defined a style of spoken word poetry over a combination of rock and roll and Native American music. In the 1990s, he took up acting, and his best-known role was likely that of activist Jimmy Looks Twice in 1992 movie Thunderheart. More recently, in 2012, together with Willie Nelson, he founded the Hempstead Project Heart, which is intended to raise awareness of the benefits of legalizing industrial hemp, and became involved with the Native American programs of the SIVA Foundation, which is an organization devoted to the prevention and elimination of preventable blindness worldwide. Now, you notice there's a quote here, and I think it's a quote that you could say pretty much sums up the man. No matter what they ever do to us, we must always act for the love of our people and the earth. We must not react out of hatred against those who have no sense. Worthy words from a man worthy of note. So R.I.P. John Trudell. All right, after that, we're going to lighten things up a bit. The Clown Award, one of our regular weekly features, given, as always, for some act of meritorious stupidity. And here, by the way, the clowns are not the lead actors in the story, so you got to wait for it. Okay? Every year since 1976, the faculty and staff of Lake Superior State University in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, have put together a list of words and phrases that are to be banished because of overuse or general uselessness. This year's list included so, when used as the first word of a sentence, conversation, problematic, stakeholder, price point, secret sauce, break the internet, I can go with that, walk it back, presser, manspreading, vape, giving me life, and physicality. The list, of course, is lighthearted. It's meant to be fun, to express your frustration at being particularly pummeled with the same word or phrase over and over again. So who are the clowns? When an article about this new list was published on AOL, comments included hundreds, and yes, I literally mean hundreds of comments, either mocking the students of the university as morons who will never get a good job. The project, by the way, is done by faculty and staff, not students. Ranting about political correctness or posting some version along the lines of blank trying to destroy free speech, with the blank filled in with either liberals or socialists or Democrats, or most commonly some version of Barack Obama. I hate to think how many of these people are actually qualified to vote. Right-wing, humor-impaired trolls incapable of understanding a simple short article. You are clowns. Frightening clowns, but still clowns. And before we get to our Clown of the Year award, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back. And what we're going to do now, as I just said, we are going to go the Clown of the Year for 2015. Now, I actually divided this into two categories because there are two ways to think of a clown. You can think of someone who's just like being silly and dumb, or you can think of someone who's just being a real jerk. And the dumb things, they don't really affect anything beyond the people immediately involved. They're just stupid and silly. But other ones, so the two categories. It's Clown of the Year, basic stupid category, which is something for just incredibly silly. And Clown of the Year, total jackassery category. This is reserved for people and institutions of greater influence whose actions or choices have a broader impact. All right, so under our basic stupid category, we did indeed have some powerful stupid in 2015. We had, for example, George Zimmerman comparing himself to Anne Frank. We had a city councilor in Springfield, Massachusetts, declaring Jesus is the reason for the season at a ceremony lighting a menorah to mark the start of Hanukkah. We had a commissioner of Blount County, Tennessee, introducing a resolution calling on God to not smite the county over the fact that Tennessee was now issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. That commissioner actually got double points because the resolution only applied to that county, apparently leaving the deity free to smite the entire rest of Tennessee. But The big red nose for Clown of the Year, Basic Stupid category, goes to the administration of Kermit Elementary School in Kermit, Texas. A 9-year-old boy, Aiden Stewart, had recently seen the movie The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. He came to school with a large blue ring, which he said was the one true ring forged in Mount Doom. He told a classmate that he could make that classmate turn invisible if he put the ring on their head. The school called that a terroristic threat and suspended him. The principal, one Roxanne Greer, said threats, real or imagined, to another child's safety would not be tolerated. So now even imaginary threats are terroristic, even when they're not actually threats. I remember, putting on the ring turns you invisible. You want to be visible? You just take the ring off again. Hey, Greer, the invisibility is a feature, not a bug. Greer refused to comment on the suspension, citing confidentiality rules. Yeah, right. The suspension isn't confidential. Saying he was guilty of a terroristic threat is not confidential. But your logic for this? Oh no, that's confidential. The administration of Kermit Elementary School in Kermit, Texas. Clowns of the Year, Basic Stupid category. All right. For the Jackassery category, we again had a lot of nominees. We had, for example, Marco Rubio dismissing talk about gun control in the wake of the San Bernardino shootings by noting that the couple who did the shootings also had some homemade bombs and saying, I don't see anybody talking about bomb control. Which is probably because bombs are already illegal, but maybe he didn't know that. There is Alaska Governor Bill Walker proposing to raise money to deal with the impacts of climate change on his state by issuing more permits to drill for more oil. Then Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear argued to the Supreme Court that Kentucky's ban on same-sex marriage was not discriminatory because while, for example, it meant that two gay guys could not get married to each other, it also meant that two straight guys could not get married to each other either, so everything's fair and, We had Ben Carson insisting that presidents can simply ignore Supreme Court rulings they don't like because those are judicial laws, not like they're real laws somehow. But our winner, if only because he was a 3-time recipient in 2015, is the man with the world's most perfect middle name because he clearly has rocks in his head, Senator James Mountain, and yes, that really is his middle name, Inhofe. This is the man who stood in the well of the Senate in late February with a snowball in his hand and declared that because it was cold in Washington, D.C. in February, because there was snow on the ground in Washington, D.C. in February, that somehow was evidence that global warming is a hoax. This is the man who, having repeatedly made that claim, even wrote a book making the claim that it's all a hoax, in May slammed Obama's climate plan on the grounds that it didn't push for more nuclear power, without which, rocks in his head, said you can't reduce carbon emissions enough. This is the man who, just a week after that, went on a rant in the Senate saying that we shouldn't even reduce carbon emissions because carbon dioxide is a fertilizer that is greening the planet. And this is the man who in December went to the uninvited to the International Climate Change Conference to be a one-man truth squad and tell the truth they're being lied to by the Obama administration because he and the rest of the troglodytes in Congress would make damn sure nothing ever got done. James rocks in his head Inhofe, Clown of the Year, Total Jackassery Division. And now going to our other regular weekly feature, this is the Outrage of the Week. And this week, the outrage is found in someone who's an absolute font of outrage, an absolute source of outrage, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, otherwise known as Justice Skeletor. He's again proven himself as an embarrassment to his position and an affront to reason. Speaking at Archbishop Rummel High School in the New Orleans suburb on January 2nd, Scalia said the idea of religious neutrality has, quote, no place in our constitutional tradition, unquote. The First Amendment, he maintains, only bars the government from favoring one religion over another. It does not bar the government, he says, from favoring religion over non-religion. In other words, according to Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, if you are an atheist or an agnostic or perhaps even just a non-practicing whatever, the First Amendment affords you no protection and no rights, because supporting religion is all part of our constitutional tradition. So here, for Antonin Scalia, here is my challenge. I challenge you to find all the references to God in the Constitution. Here's a hint: there aren't any. The only reference to religion at all prior to the adoption of the First Amendment was in Article 6, Paragraph 3, which says, quoting, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Federalist James Trudell, who was dubbed the ablest defender of the Constitution during the period in which its adoption was being debated, noted objections to that provision, the objections that people might elect pagans and Mohammedans, which is what Muslims were called, or even those who have no religion at all. But he replied, how is it possible to exclude any set of men without taking away that principle of religious freedom which we ourselves so warmly contend for? Which means that, contrary to Justice Scalia, the idea of religious freedom, including those with no religion at all, was part of our constitutional tradition from even before it was adopted. Which means not only is Scalia a reactionary religious fanatic, he's also, as is usual, flat out wrong. His presence on the court is a continuing, daily outrage. And finally for today, we have my choice for the outrage of the year. Now, yes, there were numerous outrages, far more than I had the time to cover, and actually includes one that I regret that I never got around to, one that I really should have gotten to and didn't. But nonetheless, there was one story which has been a source of outrage, and a source of outrage here across the year, and needs mention here again. The murder, and yes, I said the murder, of 12-year-old Tamir Rice by Cleveland cop Timothy Lehman. I actually first referenced this in December of 2014, a few weeks after Tamir was shot. In discussing and being disgusted by there being no charges in the death of Eric Garner, I said, quoting, now we just have to wait and see what the excuse will be while there be no charges against the cop in the murder of Tamir Rice. Because the initial police reports, which were issued before the cops knew that there was a video, were pockmarked with lies. The initial story the police told was that when they got there, there were a few people sitting at a table under a pavilion, and they saw Tamir Rice pick up the gun from the table and put it in his waistband. And the cop, Timothy Lehman, got out of the car, said to him 3 times, show us your hands. Instead, Tamir Rice pulled out the gun and so got shot. The video proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that none of that was true. When the cops, Timothy Lehman and his partner Frank Garmbach, screeched up in their car to within a few feet of him, Tamir was alone and standing outside the pavilion. Lehman jumped out of the car and shot Tamir in, and this is quite literal, based on a stopwatch comparison to the video. He shot Tamir, quite literally, in 0.8 seconds, less than 1 second after he got out of the car, which frankly is obviously not enough time to have told him 3 times, said anything 3 times. The total time since the cop car arrived until Tamir was shot was less than 2 seconds. Now, in March, I described the City of Cleveland's response to a wrongful death suit that had been filed by Tamir's family. 111 times in that response, and yes, I counted, the city used boilerplate language to say, in essence, there's an investigation going on, we don't know what happened. And then went on to say that Tamir's getting shot was his own fault. in pretty much just those words. So, in other words, the city of Cleveland's position was, we have no idea what happened, but it was all his fault. In June, I wrote a report filed just a week after Tamir was killed. Police said he would have been charged with aggravated menacing and inducing panic if they hadn't shot him to death less than 2 seconds after screeching up to him. But after what was then a 6-month-long investigation, the sheriff's office had just released its results to the county prosecutor with no suggestion about any possible charges. Around that same time, on June 11th, the Cleveland Municipal Court judge issued an advisory opinion that there was probable cause for Lehman to face murder and other charges. And on June 13th, prosecutors released documents admitting there was no hard evidence that Lehman had ever said anything to Tamir Rice before shooting him. In July, I noted the Cleveland Police Department in effect admitted that it never should have hired Timothy Lehman. 2 supervisors who hired him had been disciplined for having failed to adequately supervise and investigate his background, which would have shown that Lehman quit the Independence Police Department on his first day and had failed to get jobs at 5 other area police departments before getting the gig at the Cleveland PD. By October, I was writing about how Cleveland prosecutors were laying the ground to whitewash the killings. Prosecutors hired supposed experts who found, what a surprise, that the killing was totally justified because the only thing that mattered was if the cop just thought there was a threat. Just thought. As long as the cop just thought there was a threat, that's all that was required. Whether or not there actually was one was irrelevant. Also, the cop's actions in screeching up to Tamir and creating a confrontation and creating the risk, that was irrelevant too. Around the end of November, I was able to note that other experts hired by the family noted that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals had ruled that if a cop puts themselves in harm's way, that yes, that is relevant to the reasonableness of their actions, which means the prosecution's experts didn't even know the laws that they were citing. Finally, on November 30th, more than a year after the shootings, prosecutors finally got around to taking statements from Lehman and Garnbeck. With all that background, you probably could hardly be surprised at the result. On December 28th, prosecutors announced there would be no charges brought. Lehman walks free as a bird while Tamir Rice lies under the ground. But wait, the outrage didn't stop there. The prosecutor was quite open about the fact that he led the grand jury to that conclusion. In fact, his report to the grand jury reads like a defense counsel brief. It even had headings like, Officers Lehman and Garnbeck's subsequent statements are consistent with the evidence in this case, and the incident conforms to Cleveland Police Department's active shooter policy. And the prosecutor was later quoted as saying, "We don't second-guess police officers." Which goes to prove, finally, what we knew all along. This whole farce of a year-long so-called investigation, this whole sham of a so-called grand jury inquiry, were all orchestrated from the beginning for one purpose: to let another killer cop walk. It is a year-long outrage. It is the outrage of the year. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with more news, more things to be angry, more things hopefully to be happy about. In the meantime, have the best week you possibly can. It's good to be back. We'll see you next week. Peace.